And so I don't want to dwell on this, but actually it is on people's minds. The GDP has been growing exponentially. You can see little ripples from recessions. The Great Depression, you can see, is a little bump down, and then recovered with World War II. Hopefully we'll find a different solution to this one. But it's interesting that every recession, including the Great Depression, this curve snapped back to where it would have been had that not occurred in the first place. And what's driving this is labor productivity has gone from $30 to $130 in 45 years in constant dollars from the impact of information technology. And the application of these technologies is exponential. Here's e-commerce, now $2 trillion. And you might say, well, wait a second, wasn't there a boom and a bust in these dot-coms? How come we don't see that on here? That was a Wall Street phenomena, which we know it's not that sanguine. Not a Main Street phenomena. Wall Street looked at the internet and said, wow, this is going to change everything. This is going to turn every business model on its head. So all the values soared. But they didn't have a real model of how long that would take. And if you remember my genome curve and my internet curve, it took a decade till these, even though exponential progressions, actually got traction. So Wall Street came back 3 years later, around the year 2000, and said, gee, it hasn't changed everything. Hasn't changed anything. I guess we were wrong, and all the values went the other way. But meanwhile, behind the scenes, it was growing at an exponential pace, and you now have dot-coms like Google and other companies like that that are, in fact, doing quite well with $10 billion of revenue. And this has been a smooth exponential progression, and that will be true of biotechnology and nanomedicine. Right now, they're small phenomena in an economic sense, but as they get traction, they will be multi-trillion-dollar phenomena. And IT's share of the economy is growing exponentially. It will be most of the economy by the 2020s. Intellectual property is driving this, and that's growing exponentially. Education is growing, if you look at the macro scale, because we are destroying jobs at the bottom of the skill ladder, adding new jobs at the top of the skill ladder. So the skill ladder is moving up, and we are investing more in education. We are spending 10 times as much as we did 100 years ago in constant dollars per capita on K through 12 education. We had 60,000 college students in 1870. We have 6 million today. Solar energy. I was asked to do a project on energy by the National Academy of Engineering, and Larry Page and I took up the energy portfolio and wrote the report on that. And we looked at different energy technologies and came up with solar energy as having really the potential to transform energy because it is growing exponentially. It has been doubling every 2 years for the last 20 years. And right now it's at about 0.5% of all the world's energy. And it's very easy to dismiss technologies when they're 1% or less than 1%, just like the Genome Project was dismissed when it was 1% of the genome, and the internet was dismissed when it was 1% of potential users. And solar energy is dismissed because it's 0.5%, but it's doubling exponentially. It's only 8 doublings away from meeting 100% of our energy needs, and we are applying now nanotechnology, which is a form of information technology, to reorganizing matter and energy at the molecular level to provide new materials and new devices. And there's really developments every few weeks on some new ideas and new deployments. And this is actually the relevant curve. There's very smooth exponential growth, doubling every 2 years. And the cost has been coming down rapidly, which is driving this. So we believe within 20 years we can meet all of our energy needs through solar. And again, energy storage is a key issue because of the intermittency of solar, but we're making progress in that as well with nanotechnology. I'm involved with one company that applies MEMS to microscopic sized fuel cells. There are many ideas on how to do that. So I'll show you just one other example of technology we put together. We have a prototype of a phone like this that does translation, but rather from printed documents, it goes from spoken speech. And I've used this to talk to people, and we're actually talking also to Nokia about this. We actually took the current version of the speech recognition that I pioneered in the 1980s and the current version of the speech synthesis that my company pioneered in the 1970s, added language translation, and created this translating telephone.
This is a demonstration, comma.
Dies ist eine Demonstration
Of a prototype of a quote translating end quote telephone. Period.
von einem Prototyp eines übersetzenden Telefons.
Within a few years, comma,
Innerhalb einiger Jahre
we will be able to talk to anyone, comma,
wir werden fähig sein, zu jemandem zu reden,
regardless of their language. Period.
ohne Rücksicht auf ihre Sprache.
The rain in Spain, comma,
La pluie en Espagne
stays mainly in the plain. Period.
reste dans la plaine principalement.
Merci pour votre attention. Period.
Thank you for your attention.
Well, pardon my French. So computers are getting smaller and smaller. They're in our pockets. They'll make their way into our belt buckles and clothing. We'll solve the problem of displays. People like large displays and spend thousands of dollars. Actually, now it's hundreds of dollars on large high-definition displays, but they also like to watch movies on devices this size. We'll put them in our eyeglasses. There are already prototypes of devices like this that can beam images to your retina. The image can stay constant as you move your head by measuring your head movement. It can also take over your whole visual field of view. There's a very impressive prototype of that at Stanford. So you can enter a full immersion virtual reality environment. The most exciting application of this is augmented reality. So as you look at someone, you'll get pop-ups telling you it's their birthday next Tuesday, remind you what their name is. I would find that helpful. Effective language translation. As we get to 2029, I envision that we will have reverse engineered the human brain. We'll have computers operating at human levels. By the way, we have that already for specific tasks. I mean, I could list 100 tasks that are deeply integrated in our economic infrastructure today. Every time you send an email, intelligent algorithms route the information. Same for cell phone calls. You get an electrocardiogram, it comes back with an intelligent automatic analysis from the computer that arrives out of doctors. Same for blood cell images. Intelligent algorithms help design products, help control just-in-time inventory levels, assemble products in robotic factories, help fly and land airplanes, guide intelligent weapon systems, automatically detect credit card fraud, and I could go on. And these are tasks that used to be done by human intelligence, are now done by machine intelligence just as well or better at very low cost. By 2029, we really will have systems that can replicate the full range of human intelligence, but it's not going to be an intelligent invasion of machines to displace us. This is not an invasion from Mars. We've always used our tools to extend and expand who we are. It's the nature of being human. And we're going to do that with these devices. Nanobots, and it's actually a pleasure to speak at a conference where nanobots are talked about seriously, will be a very powerful, common application. And people say, well, what if I don't want to use them? Well, there's always going to be early adopters and late adopters. There's going to be conservative, well-tested applications. Very few people will opt out of using respir sites if it really can protect them from a heart attack and lead to better oxygenation. I was actually interviewed by ESPN saying, well, we're going to ban these in athletic contests, right? and I said, well, we should ban steroids because they're bad for your health, and if you don't ban them, you're forcing athletes to do something that's bad for their health, and that happens anyway. But if we ban these, we'll be forcing athletes to not do something that's good for their health. And if you do that, you'll have the specter of high school students in their gymnasiums routinely outperforming the Olympic athletes. But we will be expanding ourselves. These nanobots can go into our brains through the capillaries, interact with our biological neurons, put our brains on the internet, provide direct brain-to-brain communication. I mean, it's a convenient place to put it. I mean, right now it's in your pocket, so I can access all of human knowledge with a few keystrokes. It may as well be in my brain. Sometimes I leave my cell phone at home. It's a convenient place to keep it. And we will become a hybrid of biological and non-biological intelligence. And there are people, as I mentioned today, who have computers in their brain who can reprogram them from outside their bodies. Today that require surgery, but ultimately we'll send them in through the capillaries. And this will provide full immersion virtual reality from within the nervous system, but most of all, it'll provide an expansion of human intelligence, which is exactly what we've done already. Very little serious work, if any, can be done today without the expansion of our intelligence and knowledge and access to knowledge that computation and our tools provide us. And this is the progress we've made just through the linear progression of health and medicine. It's been formidable, but it's not an accurate guide to what we will see in the future now that health and medicine has become an information technology. And according to my models, which is slightly more optimistic than Aubrey de Grey's, we'll be adding more than a year every year to your remaining life expectancy about 15 years from now. And so people sometimes ask, well, when all these things you talk about come to pass, how long will human life expectancy be? And it's not a fixed number, because it's not like nothing else is going to happen from that point. If you can get to a certain point in good health, you'll be at a later point in time where there will be more technology. We'll get to a point where, and Aubrey calls it longevity escape velocity, I call it a tipping point in longevity, where the developments will be coming so rapidly, they'll be adding more time than is going by. Now, it's not a guarantee, because life expectancy is a statistical phenomenon. You could get hit by lightning tomorrow. We'll eventually have protections against that, but there are things that can happen. So it's not a guarantee, but we'll change the metaphor from the sands of time running out to them running in. And I'll just show you one quick other issue. Bill Joy wrote a famous cover story in Wired magazine, Why the Future Doesn't Need Us. And so he's been considered the pessimist, and Ray Kurzweil is the optimist, and we've been put on panels together with that expectation. But he did get his, quote, pessimistic ideas, or ideas of concern from my book, Age of Spiritual Machines. And we do agree that these technologies are potentially dangerous. And there is, in fact, a relinquishment movement. In the movie that Martina and I are working on, Bill McKibben is in the movie and articulates why we should not pursue all the things that we're talking about here today, because they're too dangerous. And relinquishment would be a bad idea, in my view, because it would deprive us of these profound benefits that we're looking forward to, and there's still a lot of suffering in the world to overcome. It would require a totalitarian government to implement. And thirdly, it wouldn't work. It would just drive these technologies underground, where they, in fact, would be more dangerous. And the responsible scientists that are empowered to create the defenses, like a rapid response system for biological viruses, would be deprived of the tools to do that. And that is really the right answer. And this is an op-ed article that argues for developing that rapid response system, and also argues for some ethical standards, like, for example, not posting on the web the full genome of the 1918 flu virus, because that's a recipe for destruction, and is potentially more dangerous than the design of an atomic bomb, and no one would argue we should put that on the web. But in my view, and that's exactly why we should not be complacent, because we have increasing power in our hands, and we need to deploy that to overcome suffering and expand human liberty and expand human creativity. And these are tools that are democratized in terms of their creative potential, while we keep humanity safe from those who would abuse it. Thank you very much.
Fantastic talk, Ray, and please line up at the microphone for your questions and answers. Great. Perfect.
Hi, Ray. Linda McDonald, Glen, Albany Medical School. Could you go back to slide number 99 for a second? It was something I just wanted to ask you about. What you said about the biological versus non-biological intelligence. One of the things that you said, I've heard you say before, and I think it's just a great quote, is that there's going to be no us versus them. We're all going to be part of the same group. Don't you think it's going to be harder and harder to distinguish between what is biological and what is non-biological? Because
Well, absolutely, because you're not going to be able to go in a room and say, okay, humans on the left, computers on the right. In 2035, a typical biological person, even one that's, say, very conservative and a late adopter, is going to have a lot of intelligent technology in their bodies and brains. And because of the law of accelerating returns, that non-biological intelligence is going to grow exponentially, not because it's self-replicating, but that's just the nature of the technology. So it ultimately will be where the action is and will be far more powerful than the biological technology. By 2045, I estimate the non-biological intelligence of the human civilization will be 1 billion times greater than the biological intelligence. That's why we call it a singularity. It's a profound transformation. But it is going to be all mixed up. And even if you have a completely non-biological system, it's derived from human intelligence, it's modeled in human intelligence, it's going to be human-like. This is human intelligence. It's one reason I actually take issue with the term transhumanism, because we're not going to transcend our humanity. We're going to transcend our biology, the limitations of biology. And doing that is exactly what humanity is all about.
and in fact, don't you foresee people doing this with animals? Other non-humans,
Well,
non-human?
that question has come up, and yeah, it's hard to give any reasons why that wouldn't happen. So
It's an interesting question, and
finally,
hypothetical we can discuss later.
finally see or hear what your cat has to say. So.
When I think about why my life today is so much, I live longer and my life is far better than my ancestors 1,000 years ago in the savannah that you alluded to. One of the reasons is that we have so many more people who are thinking of solutions to problem. I mean, here's a good example of people thinking about, their thoughts will then lead to a longer life for tomorrow. So my point is that the information explosion is accompanied, actually, it goes hand in hand with a population explosion. And so it's actually good to have more people, not fewer. And population growth, in fact, is a good thing because there'll be more people thinking about answers to problems.
Well, I mean, one of the concerns that people express about life extension, particularly radical life extension, is it'll lead to overpopulation. And I think it's a mistake to take one trend, such as life extension, and place it on today's world as if nothing else is going to happen. The same technologies that are going to lead to life extension will also lead to increased resources, like nanotechnology applied to solar energy. Ultimately will provide very inexpensive energy. There are other technologies, if we had more time, we could talk about that are emerging for water and for food production, like in vitro cloning of vegetables in factories, in vitro meat production in factories by cloning muscle tissue. I mean, there's all kinds of technologies that could be subject to the law of accelerating returns. So I don't see resources as an issue. So we can support more population. But increased population is not the only thing or even the primary thing that's leading to advances. It's really the exponential growth of our tools. I mean, the fact that I can carry around in my pocket a device that is 1,000 times more powerful than all of MIT shared when I was a student, and moreover is even more powerful than that because it ties into the entire worldwide network that carries much of human knowledge. And ultimately, our computers are not going to be limited to the tremendous power that's in that computer, but they're going to be tapping into the cloud of computing and have access to vast resources. And when we put computers in our brains, they will also be using cloud computing. So our tools also enable us to make progress a lot faster.
Thank you. It's a comment. I would like to have your view about this. I have a lot of discussions on Friday nights with my non-scientific friends and my family, saying, where you scientists are going to stop? And they say, we cannot stop progress. It's not possible. But you are changing and altering the nature equilibrium. And I said, yes, but I think and I believe that scientists can also correct the equilibrium. What do you think about that?
Well, there's a countervailing force to the progress we're making. There's, in fact, less violence from war in the world, but you wouldn't know it to turn on your computer or to turn on CNN, because now we have a front row seat on everything that goes wrong. And what goes wrong is more interesting, so it's more newsworthy, but it's also worthwhile paying attention to so we can correct those problems. So when there's a battle in Fallujah, it's right in our living rooms. 50 years ago, if there was a battle in World War II where 20,000 people died one night, you didn't see it at all, except maybe in a grainy newsreel 3 weeks later at the movie theater. So we have much more awareness of the problems, and that's a good thing, because it does lead ultimately to solutions. But people don't have an accurate perspective. They should read Thomas Hobbes as to what life was like a couple hundred years ago. It was short, brutish, disaster-prone, poverty-filled, disease-filled. Human life was extremely hard, and very few people had jobs that gave them satisfaction and allowed them to be creative. They were lucky if they could survive. So people don't have an accurate perspective. We've overcome a great deal of suffering. There's still suffering to overcome. It is really only these exponentially growing information technologies that have the scale to address the major challenges of humanity. We just started something called Singularity University with backing from Google and NASA, which will be on the NASA Ames campus starting this summer. And Larry Page said that he wanted us to devote it to addressing the major challenges of humanity. So part of it will be a team project that addresses some key issue. But it comes from a perception that it's only these exponentially growing information technologies that can address poverty, energy, the environment, disease, and other issues that plague us. So stopping technology is in fact a popular intellectual movement, and I mentioned the 3 reasons why it's a bad idea. We still have a lot of suffering to overcome, and it would require changing our very idea of progress, implementing a totalitarian system, and in fact would make the world more dangerous.